The webinar is now live.
Good morning. We'll be getting started in just a minute. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's virtual meeting on the Transportation Master Plan. A Transportation Master Plan really establishes a list of recommendations for future projects and policies. And so today we're going to dive into how we establish that list, as well as demonstrate a tool on how you can provide feedback on our draft recommendations. Next slide. But before we get into that, we do have a few housekeeping items. First, all attendees are in listen only mode. So we can hear, or you can hear us, but we can't hear you. If you have any questions or any technical issues, please communicate with us via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We are keeping this presentation to 1 hour today. So if we're not able to answer your question, we will follow up with you. This presentation will be recorded and posted on the city's website after the meeting. And we are presenting today in English, but if you do want to speak with us in Spanish about the projects or the presentation material, please reach out to us at tmp@sandyspringsga.gov and we can get back to you. And with that, I will hand it over to our consultant team at Kimley Horn. Jessica Choi, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. We wanted to welcome y'all to our second phase of public meetings. Thank you so much for joining us. I have a couple of colleagues with us today that you'll see are kind of in the background as well as presenting with me. Jordan Fuga, who is on video right now. She just waved. I'll be introducing her in just a little bit more detail, and she'll be going through some of the slides as well. So our agenda for today is relatively simple. We want to update you all on the TMP's process, how far we've come, where are we at right now, give you an overview of our multimodal needs assessment findings, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means. We also want to give you an introduction to our proposed projects, our draft list of projects and policies that we're considering as a part of the TMP. And then we're also going to give you a live demonstration of the online feedback tool that Caitlin mentioned in just a couple minutes ago. So the first slide that you're seeing here is our planning process. As some of you may know, our planning process actually started in the beginning of 2020. In February, a lot has happened. There's a lot of things going on in the world, but we're really excited to come back to you all to gather feedback again. You'll see that since our last public meeting in June of 2020, we've done quite a bit of work, particularly in the thing that I'm calling the multimodal needs assessment. That has really kind of driven our project development process for the TMP. And as we kind of go back to the public, which you all are here with us today, we're looking to finalize the plan in April of 2021. So just a couple more months out before the TMP is finalized. Our overall planning process is simplified here in this graphic to step you through what we've completed to date. Like I said, our last public meeting in June was really to give us an understanding of where Sandy Springs, where the transportation network is today, and where the city really envisions the transportation future looking like and being like. We got a lot of comments regarding specific improvements along city roadways, and we learned quite a bit regarding all multimodal types of improvements, so bicycling, walking, transit, and roadway. We took a lot of your input from the first round of public meetings and really took that into account when we started to go down the road of project development and evaluation. And so the green arrow that you're seeing on the screen here is where we are today. You know, we've developed a draft list of projects and again are bringing them to you for input. So we'll step through the multimodal needs section. There were several different types of evaluation that were done as a part of the multimodal needs assessment. We listed them here, and we're actually going to step through each of the memos and give you an idea of what the purpose of each one was and some major takeaways from each of them. And when we put them all together, the technical evaluations really gave the TMP a comprehensive look at the different modes that Sandy Springs has, and also again served as the technical basis to the draft project list. I do want to note here that the safety evaluation included both a citywide assessment of different trends, as well as a hotspot analysis of 5 locations. I'm not going to give too many details and too many spoilers here since Jordan's going to walk you through some of that. And so with that, Jordan, I'm actually going to pass the baton off to you. Could you share a little bit more about what we did?
Sure. Next slide, please. So the first effort that we are going to discuss from the multimodal analysis was our travel demand forecasting model, which is basically a tool that we use to better understand existing travel patterns in the city and how those patterns and then subsequently how traffic volumes are likely to change in the future. And that's based on a variety of things, including socioeconomic data and infrastructure projects. So for example, if we have a new roadway project or even a roadway widening type of project, if there are areas of the city where we anticipate a lot more jobs going in or areas where we anticipate a lot more housing going in, then all of those things influence where trips in Sandy Springs begin and end and how motorists or travelers route between those origins and destinations. So the model is really a very powerful comparison tool. And so what you see here is an output of our model. We built it from the Atlanta Regional Commission's region-wide model that they have for the entire Atlanta area. And then we calibrated it to reflect existing travel in Sandy Springs. So that's what our 2018 model is. And so then using that calibrated 2018 model that's refined to the city, we built a 2050 model. It keeps all of our calibration edits, and then it applies all of those planned roadway infrastructure projects that are planned for the future, as well as socioeconomic data projections from the region. So what you'll see here is that our higher volume roadways in 2018 are higher volume roadways in 2050, which is to be expected, but this also helps us identify some of our higher need areas. Our highest increases are in Western Sandy Springs, particularly along Northside Drive, Powers Ferry Road, and Mount Vernon Highway. And then there are areas of Eastern Sandy Springs with the highest increases in traffic volumes being those areas around State Road 400. That includes Mount Vernon Highway, Barfield Road, and Glen Ridge Drive. Next slide, please. So looking at volumes from the model alone isn't a totally fair way to analyze traffic along the roadway network, since several roadways are higher volume because they're designed to carry more traffic volumes. So that's why we look at volume to capacity ratio. We can get an idea of traffic congestion and quality of service by comparing a roadway's actual traffic volume to the volume to which it was designed to carry. So similar to the previous map we saw, the hotspot areas where volumes increase the most are also the areas where we see volume to capacity ratios worsen by 2050. One interesting thing that we didn't necessarily expect, like some of our other areas near 400, was over near Northside Drive at the I-285 interchange. We see a lot of increased activity in that area, and that's likely due to increased capacity that's planned for I-285. So more travelers are choosing to use this area to access the interstate. But also related to the increased capacity on I-285, some areas of the city, like Hammond Drive, are seeing some improvements. Next slide, please. So our next effort was our traffic operations evaluation. So what's pretty common when doing a citywide transportation plan, it can be difficult to get very detailed and operational information for all of our city intersections, just because there's so many. So what we did as part of this effort was do a detailed in-depth operational evaluation of 20 different intersections within the city. So it gave us a chance to look at a few locations more in depth, and that's what you see on the map. So at each of these 20 intersections, we reviewed traffic volumes and 5-year crash histories. We visited the intersection, got some boots on the ground to do a field audit. Then we did intersection capacity analysis, which allows us to quantify how much delay drivers are experiencing when they're traveling through these intersections. So from here, we were able to, we did that type of analysis for 2018, and then we did it again for 2050 as well. We wanted to look at existing conditions as well as what's projected for the future, just to see what types of both short-term and long-term needs that we need to address. Next slide, please. So based on those needs that we identified at each of the intersections, we were able to make several improvement recommendations, such as repaving and restriping, improving signal equipment, like adding backplates with retroreflective borders to signal heads or upgrading left turn signal heads to flashing yellow arrows. And then we also identified other safety operational improvements, like raised pavement markers, retroreflective median nose delineators, those sorts of things. We're in a position right now where the city has completed a lot of large roadway and intersection improvement projects pretty recently. So a lot of the recommendations that came out of this particular analysis can seem more modest in comparison, but really a lot of these are lower cost, lower effort projects that actually have a pretty high impact on traffic safety and operations. So this was a cool tool that allowed us to use the Transportation Master Plan as a way to address some more immediate needs for the city. So while some of the larger projects didn't come from this analysis, it was a really good effort to be able to jump in and look at some intersections in more detail. Next slide, please. So our next task was the safety evaluation, which Jessica mentioned before, was really 2 tasks. The first was looking at the city as a whole, but then similar to our traffic operations evaluation, we also did more in-depth safety studies at 5 high crash intersections within the city. So this map is from our citywide analysis and highlights high crash corridors based on overall crashes, which is simply just saying where areas in the cities are most of our crashes happening. But we also wanted to identify hotspots that are disproportionately overrepresented, which basically means we also looked at crashes per mile because it makes sense that longer corridors would have more crashes. And then we looked at a crash rate, which is similar to crashes per mile, but it also takes roadway volume into comparison, since it's likely that higher volume roadways and longer roadways will have more crashes. So based on these 3 metrics, we identified Roswell Road, Northridge Road, Dunwoody Place, and Hammond Drive as high need corridors. Next slide, please. So this next map depicts our fatal and serious injury crashes overlaid on crash concentrations throughout the city. And so while it's important to understand all crash trends and where they're happening, and have the goal of reducing overall crash frequency, addressing serious and fatal injury crashes can have a big meaningful impact. First, it's what saves lives, but then also addressing more severe crash types has the most meaningful economic benefits and time-saving benefits. It's going to help congestion as well. So this analysis is also how we identified the 5 intersections that we studied more in depth. That was just based off of the frequency of more severe crash types. So those are the 5 intersections that we identified by looking at crash severity. We dug into the high crash histories at these locations and identified a range of safety improvements from some of those lower cost, higher impact projects to longer term, larger projects as well. So for example, if you look at the 2 intersections at the bottom of our list, you'll notice that those 2 intersections are actually 2 intersection nodes of a single interchange. So both intersections had significant rear end and left turn crashes, and we were able to identify signal timing, signal equipment, and signing improvements in the short term to address those crash trends. But also, these 2 intersections are tied together operationally and have a lot of needs from both a safety and operations perspective. So looking longer term, this location was identified for constructing an innovative interchange. Next slide, please. As part of our citywide safety evaluation, we analyzed the city's crash history to emphasis areas that are defined from the state of Georgia's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And an emphasis area is just basically a way that helps us identify the top factors contributing to crashes in Georgia. This allows us to develop countermeasures and comprehensive safety recommendations with corresponding programs to achieve crash reductions to the types of crashes that are actually happening in our community. Identifying these emphasis areas allows us to focus our efforts on emerging safety trends and identify what's appropriate to treat them. So the top 5 emphasis areas that emerged from our analysis, listed in order for Sandy Springs, are intersection-related crashes, distracted driving. You'll also notice that we have 2 categories of older drivers, and that's because individuals who are 55 and older are more susceptible to the same, or people who are in both of these groups, they're susceptible to the same types of driving issues that are related to health, vision and motor skills, reaction time. So while it affects drivers in both of those groups, we see that in the 65 and older group, you see a steep increase in those trends. So they kind of break them out that way since it applies to both of them, but the second group, we see a lot more crashes. And then our 5th emphasis area is hit and run. Examples of some other emphasis areas in our strategic highway safety plan include crashes with commercial vehicles, aggressive driving, impaired driving, motorcycle crashes, pedestrians, bicycles. There are 15 in total. So understanding these emphasis areas allows us to tailor our approaches to roadway safety to the needs of Sandy Springs, which brings us to the 6 E's of transportation safety. Those are education, enforcement, encouragement, engineering, evaluation, and emergency response. So transportation safety is it's a lot more than the infrastructure improvements that we as planners and engineers identified. It's a team effort. So education is educating everyone on transportation safety, getting the word out about safe driving behaviors, safe travel behaviors. Enforcement. There's a lot that we can do from an engineering and policy standpoint, but a lot of those efforts are only successful with strong enforcement. And then for encouragement, this is about making a culture change, where we're in a community that encourages safe transportation decisions and behaviors. And then engineering, that's what we can do to make the built environment safer. Evaluation, that's taking a step back, looking at the work we've done, looking at our data trends, and evaluating the effectiveness, then tailoring our efforts moving forward based off of what works and what doesn't work. And then lastly is emergency response. And that's working with emergency responders to understand their needs and perspectives so that when incidents do happen, we have the appropriate emergency response plans in place. So taking this more holistic and systemic approach to transportation safety really is the best way for Sandy Springs to have an impact on transportation safety in our city. So I'm going to go ahead and pass back to Jessica to go over the rest of our multimodal analyses.
Thanks, Jordan. So our next slide is going to actually dive a little bit into bicycling and walking. And so for the bicycling and walking assessment, we looked at the existing city transportation network and tried to understand where there were gaps in the network. But another part of this analysis was to really look at the suitability of Sandy Springs streets for cyclists and pedestrians. And so as a part of this analysis, a cool tool that we really tried to use was called the level of traffic stress analysis. And so this, what we're calling LTS here, was conducted to identify where streets where most types of cyclists would be comfortable. And so the LTS analysis includes considerations of things like traffic volumes, the number of travel lanes, and speed limits. And the categories range from LTS 1, that suggests that the streets are suitable for all types of users, ages, and abilities, to LTS 4, which suggests that streets are really only comfortable for the most experienced and confident of riders. And so, when you look at that spectrum, you can see that streets that are classified as LTS 1 really have, typically lower traffic volumes, lower speed limits, fewer travel lanes, and then the opposite is true for LTS 4. So you're seeing a lot of major roadways here in that red color. And so, one of the critical takeaways that we had as a part of this analysis was that, there are a lot of facilities that are, or a lot of roadway facilities that are out there, but a lot of the city's primary and secondary street networks are really only suitable for the most experienced and confident of riders. So what does that mean? That means that if we want to be accommodating for users of all ages, all abilities, to be able to be walking and biking in our community, that we may need to consider facilities that are completely separated from the roadway, such as a side path. And so this was just a tool in our toolbox again as we started to look at project development. Complementary to the LTS, the level of traffic stress analysis, we also conducted something called a 20-minute neighborhood analysis. And the idea of a 20-minute neighborhood is to really, look at the idea that, how can we give everybody within a 20-minute walk cycle or transit trip, how can we give everybody the ability to meet their everyday needs? This concept obviously has a lot of things that are baked into it, a lot of positive features, such as, you get more physical activity, there's more focus on connections to local businesses and resources, and even potentially some less congestion on our roadways, because people will be looking to use walking and biking, for example, for those shorter trips instead of getting in their vehicle. And so as a part of this analysis, we looked at 12 specific activity centers listed here on the slide. I won't read through all of them, but a lot of these community centers were really identified because of the fact that they have multiple uses. So things like shopping or employment opportunities, health facilities, or even specifically local public transit. And our technical analysis, again, basically looked at how far can someone walk from each of these activity centers within a 20-minute distance, which for most folks is about a mile. And so this helped us to identify specific gaps in the sidewalk infrastructure, as well as major roadways that really needed a closer look for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So on the map here, you're seeing a little bit of a webbed blue color coming out from each of the blue dots that identify each of the activity centers. And you're seeing that it looks very much webbed because it's following the sidewalk infrastructure and what's available. We also conducted a transit network analysis as a part of the TMP. Now, understanding that the City of Sandy Springs is not a transit operator, we really focused on 3 specific aspects. So first is, how can we better those last mile connections to transit stops and stations? The second was, what does local circulation for public transit look like in Sandy Springs, and are there areas that we can improve? And the third was, what are some of the travel needs between Sandy Springs and adjacent jurisdictions? And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but we had a lot of really great findings. And one of the findings was something that might be a little obvious. So a lot of the concentrations of people accessing MARTA rail stations in Sandy Springs come from right nearby the station. And so in the map that you're seeing to the right, you're seeing a lot, the darker colors really closer to the MARTA rail stations. But when we dug into the data a little bit deeper, what we found is each MARTA rail station has different types of shares of people driving versus using other modes. And so when we look at North Springs, for example, 37% of folks who are accessing the North Springs rail station are driving, and that number decreases a lot when we go southbound. So when we look at Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, or medical center stations, that number goes to less than 10% of folks accessing those stations who are driving. And so there's a lot of things that we need to consider as a part of this, understanding, the ways that people are getting to and from MARTA bus routes, rail stations, et cetera. There were a lot of takeaways from this analysis. Now, when we think about the transit network, again, the city is not an operator of transit. And so we really want to think about 2 specific things. So first is, how do we prepare for the regional transit discussion? And some of y'all may know there are a lot of previous plans that are driving some of this conversation. And as a part of the TMP, we have identified ways that the city can prepare for some of the potential for these opportunities. So bettering connections to new transit opportunities, as well as for the city to continue its participation in a lot of the regional transit discussions. The second kind of bolded statement here is improving existing transit service. And So the big takeaway here is there's a lot of Sandy Springs employees and residents who are using the MARTA bus and rail services for getting to work, getting to groceries, getting to health facilities. And specifically, what we've identified here is ways that the city's existing infrastructure can be leveraged in order to allow buses to move more efficiently within the city. So one of the ways that the city can do that is improving what's called installing what's called transit signal priority, or TSP, which is essentially a modification of the traffic signal system in order to allow transit vehicles priority travel and reduce overall delay of the buses at intersections. Kind of complementary to that, we've also identified some last mile connections to the rail stations and bus stops, which again is a way that the city can help to reduce that distance or any barriers that someone might encounter when they're looking to walk or cycle to transit facilities. So that's really some of the big takeaways for transit. Now, with that, we're going to transition over to the draft projects and policies. We're going to walk you through a little bit of, the evaluation process, as well as a breakdown of the different types of projects that have come up. And then I'm going to walk you through the online feedback tool. So the 6 bullets that you're seeing, the top 6 bullets actually, may look familiar if you attended our public meetings last June. These are the TMP goals that we asked you all to help us to prioritize. And based on public feedback, we were able to assign points for each of these and then create specific metrics to evaluate the draft list of projects. And so that's what you're seeing on your screen here. Our project categories are up on your screen here. Again, this is all driven by the evaluation and the public engagement and the public input that y'all gave us last time. These projects include 4 major categories: roadway, intelligent transportation systems, bicycling, walking, and trails, and then transit. The projects themselves, you can see on the map here, span across the entire city. We won't be going through each one of these in detail during this presentation. But again, I mentioned we do have a way that you can give us some direct feedback. So give me just a couple minutes before we get there. The first major category is roadway projects. And so we have 4 big categories: intersection, bridge, capacity, and corridor. For the intersection projects, there are 2 specific types. So first is a mid-block crossing. A mid-block crossing, you can see the description here, but essentially it's a way for pedestrians and cyclists to cross safely at specific intersections. And so these are typically located in areas where there's a lot of walking and biking happening, or there's long distances between signals. So making sure that we're giving folks a great opportunity to be able to cross the street safely. There's also just intersection projects in general. These are safety and operational improvements, mostly focused on vehicular access. But again, anytime we look at a vehicular intersection improvement, we're also looking at ways to improve pedestrian crossings. The second category is bridge. And so these are any of the bridge projects that need upgrading, repair, reconstruction within the next couple of years. And there are also some multimodal and aesthetic enhancements that we've included as a part of the draft list. The third bullet here is capacity projects, which includes widening of the roadway to address any high volume and congested corridors. And then the fourth project type here you're seeing is corridor. These are non-capacity projects, which include mostly access management improvements, complete streets improvements, so things like adding more bike ped access, as well as some additional corridor studies. The next category is bicycle, pedestrian, and trails. So we have 3 specific project types here. The first is a bike ped facility, which is a separated bicycle or pedestrian path along the roadway. The second is a trail study, which includes a study of an off-road bicycle and or pedestrian facility. And then the sidewalk program, which I'm going to call out as a little bit different here, since the city does have a separate sidewalk evaluation process and methodology that they take annually. You'll see that being treated a little bit differently, but on the online feedback tool itself, you'll be able to see the different types of sidewalks that are up for consideration. Now we have ITS and transit projects listed here. And so we're going to do a build out of the fiber optic cable network. So a lot of these recommendations, again, have been driven by the ITS master plan that was adopted as a part of the ITS master plan back in March. These projects are not mapped on the online feedback tool, but if you'd like to give us some additional feedback, there is an opportunity to do that. And I'll explain in just a little bit. And then for transit projects, I mentioned earlier, there's the TSP or transit signal priority projects where we're looking to, again, provide priority to transit buses falling behind schedule. There, again, like I mentioned, there's a lot of regional focus on transit here. And so we also have studies for, bettering the connections to some of the BRT bus rapid transit opportunities that are coming to Sandy Springs. Now, as a part of the policy recommendations, there are 4 specific policies that we wanted to kind of bring to your attention that we're including as a part of the draft recommendations. The first here, if you remember, Jordan mentioned the 6 E's of safety. The Zero Deaths and Safety Systems Policy is an initiative out of the Federal Highway Administration, where we're really looking for ways that we can move towards lowering the number of crashes that result in serious injuries or fatalities. So this isn't just a policy that's going to better engineering or design, but really looks for ways, a more holistic approach to improve our transportation system. The second here is the Complete Streets Policy, which is a transportation policy and design approach that looks for streets to be planned, designed, operated, and maintained to really enable safe and comfortable travel for people of all ages, all abilities. Now, the city is currently working towards this and actively thinking about complete streets, especially through the recent comprehensive plan effort called the Next 10. But has not formalized it into policy yet. So this is one of the recommendations that have come up that we wanted to talk to you all about. The last 2 here are micromobility policies and policies to guide ride sharing. So the third bullet, the micromobility policy, obviously, I think if anybody's been on the Beltline or in other facilities, y'all are seeing bird scooters and types of e-vehicles that help to, that are driven by users personally. And so, although micromobility is not playing a huge role in the city's infrastructure and on the network just yet, we do anticipate that with good infrastructure and investment could come potentially an increase in these types of devices. And so, as we've reiterated, we want to be able to be preventative of any potential kind of things that may come to Sandy Springs versus being reactive. And the fourth bullet here is really similar, ride sharing services, Uber, Lyft. Ride sharing hasn't played a significant role just yet in the city's in the city's congestion. But really, again, we want to be considering policies such as curb management or things like that to help to manage any potential additional challenges that this may bring. So again, just the last 2 here being more preventative than reactive. Now, Caitlin mentioned earlier that we do have an online feedback tool, but before we do that, we're going to try to open it up for questions. So y'all should see a Q&A, a question and answer box. If you have any questions that you'd like us to answer at this time, please, we'll give you a couple minutes here to submit those.
And I'll just add that you can input questions at any time during the presentation. We will pause at certain points to address them, but you're welcome to submit questions at any point.
It looks like we got our first question here. Will you upload the slides onto the Sandy Springs website? And the answer is yes. So we have a project website that will share information with you. It's the next step slide in just a couple, and we will be uploading the slides for the public, as well as a recording of this session.
They will be posted later today after our presentations.
Caitlin, it looks like there's a question regarding an interchange project.
So for the Johnson Ferry at Mount Vernon interchange project, that's not something that we're studying as part of this project. We can follow up with you separately after that. Jessica, there is another question regarding some of the safety information that I think Jordan can answer. So
Sure.
Scott, we'll follow up with you separately.
And Jordan, I'm going to ask you to come back on video if you can. And so the question is, your research on increased crashes for ages 55 to 64 and 65 plus varies from other DOT and AAA research that shows age groups to be lower in crashes. Jordan, do you want to share a little bit about the emphasis areas and kind of how that correlates?
Yeah, so what I was sharing was from Georgia specific. I know that AAA research is nationwide and other DOTs are experiencing different things. But the state of Georgia, for the strategic highway safety plans, they have different committees and they pull in different research groups to look at crash trends in Georgia, and they look through all the emphasis areas were defined from all of those analyses. So those are just the trends that we're seeing in Georgia from our historical crash data.
Thanks, Jordan. All right.
All right, if you have any more questions during the presentation, please do use the Q&A box. But Jessica, I think you can go ahead and jump into the online feedback tool demonstration.
Sure, sounds great. All right. So everyone should be able to see my screen here. We will, on the slide previously, there was the link to the survey, and we'll make sure again to share that with y'all. So this is the online feedback tool that we have. I'm going to introduce you to the different tabs that are available, and then also kind of share with you the specific instructions that we're looking at. And so the landing page for this online feedback tool is what you're seeing here. So it's the instructions tab that you see highlighted here, instructions. So the tab, the gray box here on the left introduces you to the tool and includes specific instructions on how to proceed. It also tells you what each of the tabs contain and what the tool is asking you to complete as a part of each of the tabs. Now, you'll see again, I'm going to point this to you several times. Each of these tabs has an ability for you to give us more feedback. And so if you have more questions or things that you want to look at in further detail, we have our project website here linked, as well as the email address that you can email, and it will directly come to Caitlin, who will help us kind of facilitate any of those questions. And so all that information is here and available to you in this landing page. The top banner here in dark blue that you're seeing where it says Sandy Springs Transportation Master Plan, that's a banner that will remain no matter what tab you're in. It does include, again, just some quick instructions, quick highlights, and it also tells you that the survey will be live until February 18th. I'm going to point you to 3 icons before we proceed. We have a Facebook icon, a Twitter icon, and this is just a copy link icon. So, we encourage you all to share this with your friends and your neighbors and coworkers, and, help them to help us get some feedback for the projects that are being recommended. The second tab here is called Your Travel Habits. These are just a few optional questions that we have to tell us more about who you are. I will say the information that you provide here and the feedback is completely private and anonymized. And for these questions, if you'd like to answer them, all you need to do is click in this white box here, and then several options will pop up. And we have a couple of questions that you can kind of scroll through and see. There's also an option on the bottom here where you can leave us your email for TMP updates. This is, again, our planning process is a couple months out from being complete. So if you have questions or if you want to just be notified when things are going on, this is where you would leave your email. All right. And make sure to click submit at the end. All right. So we talked a lot about projects. And so you'll see the bicycling and walking tab I just opened. The next 3 tabs that I'll be sharing with you are specifically project related. Now, each of the 3 next tabs will have a pop-up that comes up that reminds you of the instructions and the specifics that we want you to know before you get your before you start on the activity. Now, just in case you don't remember that, we also have the instructions on this top blue banner, as well as some high-level instructions here in this gray box. On the gray tab here, you'll see, again, instructions, and then also the specific project types that we're asking you to take a look at. And so the project types for bicycling and walking are sidewalk program projects, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, as well as trail studies. Now, if you're on your computer, you'll be able to click within the map boundaries. So I'm using my mouse here and I'm kind of scrolling around. You're going to be able to see what all the projects look like and kind of their distribution around them. Again, on your mouse, if you're using the scroll button, you can kind of zoom in and out of the projects as well. So that's really great if you wanted to look, again, in a little bit more specificity for where the projects specifically are. Now, to look at specific projects, what you need to do is click on the project itself. And you'll see I'm going to click right here. And so this is Dalrymple Road. There's a project along Dalrymple Road that I just clicked on. So you'll see some specifics. So things like, what's the project name? What are the extents of the project? What's the type of project that we're talking about here? The description, as well as the cost. And so lots of details here that you'll get once you click onto the specific project. Now, here's where your feedback comes in. So you'll see that there's a little heart button here, as well as a comment button. If you want to just tell us that you like the project, you can go ahead and click on the heart. It says vote for this item, so you just click on it to let us know you like it. If you want to let us know some more details regarding the project, there is a comment bubble here. So if you click on the comment bubble, this automatically pops up and it shows you a little comment box where you can type in a response. And then after you're done, you can click submit, and that'll get logged for our records. And so again, give us your specific feedback on specific projects. You'll also see this project list here, and you can also scroll down. If you're not a map person and you'd rather look at specific, you're looking for some specific roadways, this is a great way for you to get a good summary of what they are. Again, if you wanted to unclick and zoom in and out, you just use your mouse and to be able to scroll around the city. So that's the bicycling and walking projects. You'll see for the roadway projects, it's very similar to the way that the bicycling and pedestrian, but the biking and walking projects are set up. So again, a pop-up window comes up. On the left here, it tells you how to proceed to give us feedback, how to go ahead and click on the lines or the points for projects. There's also a list of the specific projects that are up for you all to give us feedback on. And so there's a project legend, again, tells you what the colors are, what all of that represents. And so here again, I'll kind of quickly click something here. So I clicked here on this intersection. And so there's some bridge enhancements that we're looking at. And so again, it tells you what the project is, what the project cost is, and then there's an ability for you to like the project and then give specific comments if you so wish. The third tab here, again, is a transit project. There are a little bit fewer transit projects here for you all to take a look at. And again, same concept, click on the project. If you click on it, you can either heart it or you can let us know some additional comments on your thoughts of what you think about that specific project. And this blue arrow right here, if you do click on a specific project and you click this arrow to go back, it'll take you to the full list of projects for you for your master view, essentially. The next tab is the What's Missing tab. And so here we want you to add any final thoughts or comments, concerns in the text box below. You can type your concerns out and then click submit. This would be a great place if you think that we have missed a project, or if you want, if you're seeing something in here that you'd like us to just note as a part of this, you like it. For example, you want to add some more comments, this is where you can do that. Again, this will be, again, recorded as a part of our public feedback. So just let us know any other things that we may have missed. The last tab here is the FAQ tab. We do have a couple of questions here that we thought may arise as a part of this public feedback tool. And so things like, how will my comments and responses be used? When will these recommended projects be constructed? There's a little bit of an answer here. The hint is that the projects are not funded quite yet and do not have a construction timeline. And then there's a question here about T-SPLOST and CIP projects. And so any details, or if you have any questions beyond the ones that are shown here, please email us. The email is again repeated on this tool as well as on the slides, but it's tmp@sandyspringsga.gov. And just let us know your specific question and we'll get back to you. So that is what we have on the public feedback tool. I saw that there were a couple of questions, but it looks like they've been answered. The online feedback tool, you'll see that the link is here, spr.gs/survey. And again, this link will be available on the project website, as well as the slides when they're uploaded to the project website at the end of the day. All right, we already did our demo, so we're going to go to the next steps. I mentioned this. Oh, Caitlin, do you want to take us away for the next steps?
Sure, thank you, Jessica. So the online survey that Jessica just walked through will be open from today after this meeting until February 18th. And the online survey link will be posted on the project's website. So if you want to see materials from that presentation today, the online survey link, and also the draft project list, please do visit us at the website posted on the slide. And we're anticipating that the draft and final plan will be expected around spring 2021. And again, I'm Caitlin Schenkel. I'm the transition planner with the city. Please do feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have about the plan or even anything else related to transition in the city. So just really thank you so much for your time. And we do have about 15 minutes for questions if anyone has anything outstanding. All right, well, as people are thinking of questions, we'll remain on the line for the next 10 to 15 minutes as people are thinking through questions. But just again, want to reiterate, we really appreciate your time. We wish we could be there in person with you. If you have any further questions on what the projects mean, we're also happy to set up calls or email us about any of those things, because we do realize there's a lot of value in having in-person conversation, but unfortunately, due to COVID, we just aren't able to do so this time. But thank you for your flexibility, and we really hope to see some good feedback from this. So thank you.
Caitlin, it looks like we got a question regarding copying and pasting the TMP link to the Q&A chat box. We'll make sure to send this link out.
Yes, there'll be a follow-up email with all the information we discussed today. All right, and we have one more question regarding Hammond at Glenridge intersection. So that is actually not one of our transportation master plan new projects. And so since that is an existing project, I can put you in touch with the project manager for that one. All right. I think we're all out of questions. So I'd thank Kimberly Horn for joining us today. Really appreciate everyone's attendance. If you have any more questions, feel free to email us. Thank you and take care.